Well, Homeland Security has instructed FEMA to help shelter and transfer unaccompanied minors at the U.S.-Mexico border. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says the move will help get children out of immigration detention centers, and they will instead be put in the care of Health and Human Services. Now, at this point, it's not clear where exactly the children will be housed, but the vacant property at the former Moffett Field Naval Station in Mountain View is reportedly one of a handful of sites that could be used. Now, according to the U.S. Refugee Office of the Department of Health and Human Services, last week there were more than 8,500 minors in its shelters, and an additional 3,500 are in Border Patrol stations just waiting for beds to open up. So estimates say there could be another additional 500 more, which is every week, which is a threefold increase since December. So certainly a lot to talk about. We want to bring in Mark Naveau. He served as a federal coordinating officer working with FEMA. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, Mark.
Good morning, Claudine.
So we're not really talking policy because that's a whole other debate and discussion, but we are talking procedure and process because we want to know how you move this amount of people and specifically children safely. And so tell me about what's happening now and how that changes what we have seen at the border.
Yeah, well, you touched on a little bit. Let's put it in, kind of a reference point here. Over the last 30 days, immigration has increased 28%. Over the last year, there are about 30,000 unaccompanied minors attempting to cross the southwest border, including 3,000 that are aged under 12. And so what's happening is you're starting to see a situation where it's overwhelming the resources. So the president has asked the DHS secretary, who has directed FEMA to coordinate the effort. Now, this is not unusual because they did this during the Obama administration when a similar situation happened. So FEMA's engaging, and why they choose FEMA to participate in this is because FEMA has a background of coordinating incident management across all federal agencies, both at the state and local. So what they're asking FEMA to do is to come in and figure out where we can locate more facilities. What that's going to look like, as you touched on earlier, are similar to hard-sided tents that we use for different field hospitals, command and control centers during disasters, and they're going to open up those facilities. But to do that, they need a number of different agencies, private contractors, all moving in the same direction, Claudine.
Well, you talk about how FEMA has done things like this before in the Obama administration in certain circumstances as well in other times when they needed these kinds of facilities and this kind of process. You also have Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, who actually had experience in addressing the problem, as do some of the other people in charge. How much do you think that will help in making this streamlined and saying, look, we know how to do this, here's how we should do this, here are some pitfalls that we want to avoid?
Yeah, hugely. As you said, the DHS secretary was the deputy secretary at the time they went through this during the Obama administration. Also, the gentleman in charge, who is from San Francisco, Robert Fenton, is the acting FEMA administrator, who was also at FEMA during the Obama administration and was going through this. They've tapped a national incident management team. There are 3 of them in the country that manage presidential disasters, very complex stuff. And they've tapped one of those teams to come in and coordinate in the field this operation. So what they're going to end up doing is using the National Response Center out of FEMA headquarters, along with the National Incident Management Team on ground down at the border, and coordinate. The same individual that runs that team, the team lead, Kevin Hannes, was also the same team, same individual they used last time. So there's some familiarity for what they need to do. Plus, there's relationships with other agencies in place that will pay dividends as they move through this challenge.
Well, the big difference that obviously, the elephant in the room in terms of we've done this before, unfortunately, but we've got COVID now. And how does COVID-19 change and complicate this?
Well, it does in some degrees. When we're talking about last month, there were over 100,000 folks trying to cross that border. We're talking in this particular discussion about kids. And COVID-19, they don't necessarily carry that per se. Now, they can, don't get me wrong. But because of that, they're going to have medical screening both at the border, then as they move them. And the idea behind this by legislation is they've got to have the children out of the border facilities into an HHS temporary facility within 72 hours. And that's not happening right now because they're overwhelmed. But HHS, Human and Health Services, can provide counseling, medical care, screening, COVID screening. All of that's factored into it. Also a challenge with, spacing. Initially, they were having enough room, 6 feet, to be able to provide for COVID-19 if there was an issue. But unfortunately, because of the numbers, they've had to, shrink those facilities down and put more kids in it. That's why the move to expand the number of facilities to provide more open space because of COVID-19 and the pandemic.
So, Mark, I guess the question is at this point, how long till we see relief? I mean, it's a crisis at the border. This is a lot of people that we're dealing with and a lot of young people, and people want to see it resolved. It does take time. How much time before we can say, yes, this is working or this is not working and we need to do something else?
Well, they're already making movements on it right now. There are people deployed. They're working through the weekend. They'll work until they can get this thing figured out. You're going to see them start to move to different locations that already have existing facilities. So within the next week to 48 hours, and some movement, but you're going to see some of those children move farther out into facilities, military bases across the country. While they're doing that, they're also trying to locate family within the United States to be, to be able to be sponsors for these kids, so they want to move them out of the temporary facilities and into their family member's home is the idea behind it. So they're trying to do that simultaneously while finding additional facilities for them.
Okay, we'll continue to follow this very closely. Obviously, a lot happening, and it's still developing. Mark DeVoe, a former federal coordinating officer of FEMA, we always appreciate your expertise and your insight. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Have a great weekend, Claudine. Thank you.